Hi, and thank you for clicking on this video. Please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. First off, I want to start by saying this is definitely a heartbreaking case that will leave you pretty much stunned and speechless. It's a child that was murdered, not by an adult, but by another child. Today's case is about Maddie Clifton. Maddie Clifton, who went by the name Maddie, was born on June 17, 1990. She lived with her father, Steve, and her mother, Sheila, and her sister that was her absolute best friend, Jessie, in Florida. It said that Maddie was a very happy little girl who had many friends. She loved playing baseball and hockey and also loved dancing and playing the piano. She was a very active little girl. Maddie would often play with her 14-year-old neighbor named Joshua Phillips. He would come over and play at their house, and they often played at his house too. The rule for Joshua at his house was that no one was allowed to be over at the house while the parents were out. It was said that Joshua had a crush on Maddie's sister Jessie, and apparently went into Jessie's room while playing at their house one day. The parents found out and told him that he was no longer allowed at their house. A little about Joshua Phillips. He was born on March 17th in 1984. He lived with both of his parents and was deathly afraid of his father. His father apparently had a very bad temper and took it out on both Phillips and his mother. It's also said that Phillips' father was a drug user and an alcoholic. On November 3rd in 1998, the Cliftons' family changed forever. Maddie Clifton wasn't home in time for dinner. Jessie, her sister, was sent out on her bike to go search for her. As Jessie rode her bike through the neighborhood, she was yelling Maddie's name, but Maddie never answered. When the police were called and wasn't found that day, they searched the neighborhood, along with many volunteers. The police quickly suspected Larry Grissom, who was a neighbor. The reason for the police thinking Grissom may have been the suspect was because he had been arrested twice in the past, both times between 15 to 20 years earlier, in sexual battery cases. But in both incidents, charges were dropped. Grissom actually failed a lie detector test in relation of Maddie's disappearance, but provided a very strong alibi and was let go. The police called off the search for Maddie, but the community, including over 400 volunteers, persisted. An award was offered that was initially $50,000, but it was later doubled to $100,000, but still no one found Maddie. A week after Maddie's disappearance, Philip's mother went into his room to tidy up, but she noticed this odd smell. She then noticed that the waterbed her son slept on appeared to be leaking. When she investigated further, she was met by the sight of Maddie's dead body. Understandably horrified, she fled from the house and got the police, who were across the street at Maddie's house. The body had been smashed with a baseball bat and stabbed 11 times. When questioned as to why he would hurt Maddie, Phillips explained that Maddie had gone over and asked to play baseball. Phillips agreed, even though he was not allowed to have friends over while his parents weren't home. Phillips said as they were playing baseball, he threw the ball at her and it accidentally hit her in the eye, causing her to bleed, cry, and scream uncontrollably. Phillips panicked. Knowing his father Steve would be home soon, he was fearing for his reaction. He dragged Maddie into his house. He said that the clothing came off her lower body as he dragged her to his room. He hit her again with a baseball bat to stop her from screaming, before putting her under the base of his bed. When his father Steve returned home, he said he interacted with him for a little before returning to his room. That's when he discovered that Maddie was still alive, moaning under his bed. He removed the mattress and stabbed her in the chest 7 times with a knife, killing her. Police and volunteers searched for Maddie for 6 days. Phillips also participated in the search. He later stated he spent the following week living in denial, saying, "I was putting myself in a fantasy world that nothing had happened. That was my defense mechanism for everything when I was a kid." Phillips was arrested that same day at school and confessed to the murder within hours. Phillips was tried as an adult. His trial was held in 1999 and was moved to Polk County, Florida, over concerns about publicity in Jacksonville. Jurors quickly convicted him of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But in a case known as Miller versus Alabama, the U.S. Supreme Court in 2012 bared mandatory sentences of life without parole for juveniles convicted of murder. Phillips received a new sentencing hearing after the law took effect and was again sentenced to life in prison in 2017, subject to be reviewed after 25 years. Phillips appealed, arguing in part that his sentence violated the constitutional ban on cruel and unusual punishment because he was proven himself to be neither incorrigible, irredeemable, nor irreparably corrupt, and that he had matured during nearly 2 decades in prison. But the appeals court disagreed with his argument. To begin with, Phillips did not receive an inescapable, irrevocable life sentence. Phillips is entitled to a review of his sentence after 25 years to determine whether his sentence will be reviewed again and would be modified in 2023 based on demonstrating maturity and rehabilitation. That being said, we shall see what happens in 2023 with Phillips. But of course, Maddie's story didn't end in 1999 when Josh was shipped off to prison. The lives of those associated with him and with Maddie continued to veer off course. The day Maddie was found under Josh's waterbed was the day Jessie Clifton began to lose her identity. She was a nerdy kid growing up and didn't hang around with the popular kids. She stated, "I was never the cool kid in school, and I was made fun of. I was the geek. But suddenly with the death of my sister, everyone, it seemed, wanted to know me. It bothered me, because in my mind, these school kids never cared for me before." Jessie also felt as though she was not Jessie Clifton anymore. Rather, she was Maddie Clifton's sister. "That's who I became. I wasn't Jessie," she said. A similar thing happened to Missy Phillips also, who is Josh's mother. Phillips said she tried to withdraw from society as best she could. She split her time between Jacksonville and North Central Florida, hoping maybe she would reinvent herself. For some reason, she thought if she rode her bicycle places, people wouldn't put the face with a bicycle rider, and therefore she would go unnoticed. Eventually, she did get noticed in a church. "Are you Josh's mother?" asked the strange woman who approached her. Phillips said she thought about lying, but then remembered she was in church. "Yes," she told the woman, bracing for the worst. The unexpected happened when the woman reached out and embraced Phillips. "Things like that," Phillips said, "happen more than once. That makes me feel better." Also, making her feel better is Jessie Clifton's warmth back then and more recently. Jessie Clifton recalled how Phillips stayed inside after her son was arrested. She stated she hated to come outside, so Jessie Clifton helped her out. She'd walk their dog, and when she'd see Miss Phillips pull up to the driveway from the grocery store, she said she'd race over there to help her carry her grocery stacks inside. Phillips sent the family a Christmas card each year. "She was such a sweet and kind person. She didn't deserve what happened," Clifton said. "I feel like she feels everyone was against her. She found Maddie, and I cannot even imagine that, and then to realize what her son had did. That is a lot for one person to handle," Jessie said. The two of them shared a bond that day in November 1998 when Clifton lost her sister and Phillips lost a son. "A loss is a loss," Jessie said. Lives continue to unravel. Missy Phillips' husband, Steve Phillips, died in a car crash. Steve and Sheila Clifton divorced after 25 years of marriage. The couple had been together since high school for 30 years, but Maddie's death put an end to their normalcy the family once enjoyed. "Everything stopped when the parents divorced," Jessie said. "They handled the grief differently, with my dad largely shutting down and my mom wanting to talk about it." Sheila Clifton moved into her mother's house in the same neighborhood, allowing her to still be close to her daughter, but away from the Phillips home where Maddie died. She then moved to McKinley, Florida, where she is today. Steve Clifton moved out of the house. Jessie still lives there and is in process of buying it from him. To her, it's a home where many fantastic memories were made before 1998. "It's always been my home," she said. So this is just a sad story all around. But what's your opinion? Do you think that he should be held accountable for the rest of his life for the crime that he committed at the age of 14? A lot of people say, of course, the brain at that age is in no way to process the weight of his actions, being so young. It's a sad case, really. I personally feel kind of stuck in the middle. I feel somewhat as in 14 years old, maybe he does deserve a second chance. Maybe it's not now, maybe it's in 10 years from now, or maybe, he does deserve a second chance just because he was so young. And then the other half of me is thinking, no, this kid took a life. Why shouldn't he spend the rest of his life in jail? That little girl doesn't get to grow up and have a family and get married. I don't know. It's just a hard, sad case. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for listening and hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye.